That's good. Hi, everybody. We're so glad you're here. Welcome to our first ever Nature Keepers and Keystone Volunteers quarterly chats. So this is something brand new we're trying. This is our very first ever pilot. And what we wanted to do is just honor the people who have decided to really dedicate themselves either with their time or their financial resources to nature in the city. And we are, just so grateful to offer something like this. And we're really excited that we get to do it today and try something new. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback about time and format and topics so we can share more about that at the end of the meeting. But let's see. Also, Zoom 101, a lot of you are regulars in Zoom, but let's mute ourselves when we're not speaking just to make sure the line is clear. And you are welcome to put as much in your name as you like, your full name or your affiliation or none of that. And be on camera or off, but on is always nice to see your beautiful faces. Let's see what else. First, I'd love to just go around and have everybody introduce themselves and then talk about what your connection is with nature in the city. Maybe we can do like somebody could go and then they could pick on the next person.
I'm Larry Granitor. My first contact with nature and city was a field trip at Fort Funston. And it was so much fun. And I learned so much that I felt like I needed to get more involved. And being retired, it's nice to have places where I can volunteer with whatever skills I can provide.
Nice.
I'll go next only because I'm just dying to know which of the Fort Funston walks that was. Who was the walk leader for that one? Do you remember?
Emil was there. And then this woman, I don't remember her name, who was like a seaweed expert.
Yes, Josie Iceland.
She was incredible. And I bought one of her books out of her back seat of her car in the parking lot. And yeah, I was just impressed with all the information. And, it's like, I've been to Fort Funston plenty of times. Boy, I saw it with new eyes because of that trip. It was really wonderful.
That was also the day we rescued the elephant seal pup, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there was
that was an eventful day.
Yeah.
Well,
And
cool.
that particular trip I liked so much, I actually took a friend there yesterday and kind of repeated some of the things that I had learned, some of the geology. There was no seaweed to be seen. But
he brought the book, held it up.
Yeah, right.
That's good recall.
Well, thanks for sharing, Larry. That makes my day because I'm Laura and I'm on the advisory council and I also help organize the walks. So that one was Emil's brainchild. I'm the one behind the scenes kind of getting the people there and then handing it over to the walk leaders. So that's kind of my niche with nature in the city and apparently also tech support. So I'm helping Amber out today. And let's see, I'll pass it over to Tom.
Unmute myself. Hi, I'm Tom Scharfenberger. I am also on the advisory council, and I've been volunteering Nature in the City, I think, for now almost 5-6 years, and just love the group, love the walks, love it, all aspects of it. So, yeah. All right. How about Mia?
Hi, I'm not on my video because my connection's real weak, so I'll try later, just to let you know. I'm Mia Monroe. I'm a retired park ranger and a volunteer with the Xerxes Society. So think monarch butterflies, though I absolutely love green hair streaks too. And one of my earliest memories of nature in the city is when World Environment Day was being hosted by the city of San Francisco with big components at Muir Woods. And Nature in the City took a real leadership role to amplify the connection of nature and cities and our advocacy. So I really respected. But now I also really treasure these kind of relationships with Amber and Laura and others, and have more time now to go on field trips. So thank you.
And I'll go too, because I came into Nature in the City as a volunteer at first, and I also give monthly to the organization. My name's Amber Hasselbring. I've been leading the organization since 2013. And I started on the advisory council in 2006, where I met Laura, and I met Mia shortly after that, and so many people, and David also around 2012 or 13. So I love this work, and it's really helped me to develop creatively and professionally, and get to meet the most cool people. I feel really, really grateful. Yeah. So with that, I want to turn it over to David, or introduce David, who's our special guest speaker today. And David is a writer, walk leader, well-known speaker. He's led thousands of walks, talks, and classes and workshops, and he led one this morning, actually. So all over California, but also in Yosemite, I read on your bio. One thing that you should really know about David is that he's got this incredibly cool newsletter called Lukas Guides newsletter, and we'll put the link to his website in the chat, and then in the notes if we record this later, and we want to share this with everyone. But the newsletter, it just delivers these natural phenomenon in these creative and inquisitive, much deeper perspective ways than you might get if you're, on Wikipedia. So, I mean, that's not even a compliment, but I think you might understand what I'm talking about if you get to read one of those. And I think you'll understand more just from hearing him today. So I'm very excited. And David, I'd love for you to tell us kind of what your journey is into the work that you're doing now. We all have a journey into the nature work, and I think a lot of people would love to do this professionally, even though it has its hardships, but tell us how you got here.
I'll keep it brief. It's nice to be compared to Wikipedia. Yeah, I'm David Lukas, and I spent my life working as a freelance naturalist. Basically, I just love to be out hiking and exploring nature every day, and trying to figure out how in the heck to make a living at it. So what I do is just translate what I see and learn, the questions I have, the curiosities I have, into things that I can share with people. I have a huge library. 4 sides of me are natural history books. Um, so basically, I'm out hiking every day, observing, taking notes, coming back, trying to answer the questions and explain the observations that I come up with. And I've been doing that since I was 5 years old, just absolutely fixated on memorizing field guides, studying field guides. I mean, I go to bed every night studying field guides after, I'm not going to tell you how many decades, but a lot of years of just studying relentlessly every aspect of the natural world. These are very obscure books around me. I have read most of them. And then finding ways to share and translate that for people. I love to share the natural world with people, whether it's on a walk and on a talk, through my writing with my books. I've worked on 47 books and hundreds of articles. And as Amber said, thousands of classes and workshops. So that is my passion. I love to do it. I love when we can all come together around a topic like this and just explore together, and riff off of whatever we know together, and with our questions and our curiosity. And my most recent project, as Amber mentioned, is to actually do 2 newsletters every week. One is specific to my local area, a chronological nature notes every week of what's happening in my local area. I live in north central Washington right now. If anyone knows North Cascades National Park, I'm surrounded by 3 million acres of wilderness, in a very remote area. And so it's an incredible area, but giving talks like this is how I connect to the world around me. Let's see. So, and one other thing I've done is I've written several bird books. So I come into birds. I wrote Bay Area Birds, which is now out of print. But even better, the Kindle version is online at Amazon, so you can actually have it on your phone or on your iPad, and then use, rather than carrying a stupid book around, you can just look up things, and the Kindle version. And I still have copies of Sierra Nevada Birds left if people are interested. These little compact field guide companions, which are detailed life history, status and observation, status and distribution, without pictures to weigh it down. So it's a little tiny thing you can slip in your pocket that has all the details you want. And I started watching birds from a very young age. And then I was amazed when I discovered that other people cared about birds, and it was a way to connect with people. And so I started taking it much more seriously in terms of putting together ideas and organizing talks and presentations like this and thinking about different topics, because to lead a bird walk is a great way to connect with people. So that's what we're going to do today with bird migration. So I guess I can just jump into bird migration, right, Amber? Yeah. So today we'll talk a bit about bird migration. Really incredible topic and a great time right now. I don't know if people know this website, Birdcast. You can go to Birdcast and watch replays of the last 24 hours. You can go to any date you want, but right away on the front home screen is the last 24 hours. And you can click on a button and it will show you 10-minute increments of where the birds in North America are migrating. And I checked for last night, there was 460 million birds migrating over North America last night at the peak time around midnight. So migration is totally happening right now. And I want this to be kind of a conversation. So have people been noticing migration where you are? Are you seeing new arrivals or anything happening there? Kind of curious what people are seeing there, how you are noticing migration happening. Because since the beginning of human history, recorded history, seeing migration happening has been a big part of the human experience. Seeing like all these amazing birds all of a sudden. So I hope you've been noticing that too, right? So
Oh, wait, I think
nowadays,
Laura raised her hand to
yeah,
say
go ahead. Sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was a rhetorical question. I saw a black-headed grosbeak on my bird feeder today for the first time ever,
Yep.
and got a good picture of it on for iNaturalist, but
Right.
that was fun.
And I saw
Anyone else?
Wilson's warblers for the first time last Thursday. No, yeah,
That's
last
great.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And amazing thing and exciting thing, which you guys encapsulated with your observations there, is like we notice observation because we see the first of the year, like, oh, the first Wilson's Warbler of the year, the first black-headed grosbeak. So these birds that were gone have suddenly appeared. And then in the fall they leave, but that's more subtle. But in the spring, it's so exciting after a long, dreary winter to have a new bird arrive all of a sudden. So people have noticed that always, that birds arrive. And like, so what's going on, right? So the whole idea of migration is not that easy to explain. And so imagine what it would have been like 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. How do you explain migration? I mean, birds disappear, and then like all of a sudden, the Wilson's Warbler pops up. Where did it come from? Did it just spring out of the ground? Did it pop out of a hidden crevice in a rock or something? So people had no real clear way of explaining migration, and it's only been in the last 100 years that we've actually had concrete evidence because of. Does anyone know how we started discovering migration?
community science,
Is what?
community
Community
science
science?
projects like Audubon.
No,
Camping,
I think community science is more new, but
Okay.
that's been what's kept it going. Yes, but I mean,
bird banding.
bird banding is the answer. Exactly. So Aristotle, who was the first great thinker about a lot of ideas, natural history related, wrote a lot about birds and bird migration, and his idea was that birds hibernated in the winter. They just disappeared because they went into hibernation. And he was such an influential thinker that for 2,000 years, that was the idea that birds hibernated. And of course, when the uh, Europeans started exploring, they started noticing as they were traveling around the world in their ships, they started like noticing, oh, our birds are in Africa. Oh, that's interesting. But that's still not connecting an individual bird that's moving systematically back and forth. It's just like, oh, our birds are there too. Maybe that's where they live, right? So really, like Mia said, until they started bird banding, we did not know that individual birds were actually migrating, right? So it's so obvious now, but it has not always been so obvious. And does anyone know when bird banding started? Mia, do you know when bird banding started? Not to put you on the spot. Maybe we don't have her. So anyone else? Any ideas on bird banding? Yeah, Thomas?
Um, did it have something to do with pigeons or whatever? People who had pigeons or yeah, I don't know.
Right. Sure. That's probably pretty close to the answer. So it actually started in 200 BC in Egypt, where people would put colored threads around the legs of their birds, but it was to probably for pigeons or maybe hunting falcons or something like that to signify ownership so that you knew whose bird was whose and you could find them again and know that it was your bird. But that's totally different than a scientific study, a systematic scientific study. And that only started 100 years ago, which is amazing. I mean, it's so obvious now, but we've only been having systematic bird banding studies helping us understand bird migration for 100 years. So, and that was the first time that we could actually concretely say that individual birds were migrating, right? So here's a good question for you then. What is migration? So we throw this term around a lot, but what does migration mean for birds?
Well, they go from one place to another to make families.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then they leave places where they've been
Yep.
eating to store up energy so they can do the
hmm
flight.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. The hard part about that is that birds are always flying around, right? They're always moving and going back and forth across the mudflats in the bay or flitting through the trees. So is that migration? I mean, it's kind of hard to tease out what migration is because birds are always moving. It isn't just birds moving from one place to another. It is something different. It's not just a general bird movement. It's a specific kind of bird movement, which is characterized by what? There's probably two things that characterize migration,
Well, the seasons affect them.
right? It's this
So they're
predictable time of
escaping
year.
winter to be places where they could still survive.
Yes. So it's a predictable time of year and in a predictable direction, right? So whatever there's so many different kinds of migration. Some birds go upslope in the mountains. They like spend the winter down in the valleys, and then in the summer they go upslope a couple thousand feet to nest, and then the next winter they come down 1,000 feet. That would be a migration. You could have ducks moving from a little cattail marsh to the wetlands in the bay to molt their feathers in late summer. That's a molt migration, so that's a migration. So it doesn't necessarily have to be north and south. And it doesn't have to be spring and fall. So when does migration happen? What time of year does migration happen? Here's a great question for you.
Year round.
Year round, every single day and every moment of the year, birds
Wow.
are migrating day and night. Even in the middle of July or in the middle of December, birds are migrating. They're migrating everywhere, every day and night, all over the Earth's surface. It is like a fact of life for birds that they're always migrating somewhere on the Earth's surface. But by and large, if we're talking about migration rather than just birds moving, they are moving in a predictable direction, back and forth at a predictable time of year, right? And with that in mind, it's kind of like a mass movement of biomass on the Earth's surface because birds are all moving, like mostly birds are moving from north in the northern hemisphere towards the equator for the winter and then back north. That's the general large scale movement. In fact, so like in North America, for instance, migration is the uh, overwhelming fact of life for birds, except for one area in North America where birds don't generally migrate. Anyone know where that is?
Well, no, that wouldn't be.
California coast, Central California coast
Wow, why would that
is
be?
the one spot in North America where birds don't need to migrate because the year-round conditions are so mild. Um, there's about 650 species of birds in North America. 550 migrate. And so that leaves about 100 that don't migrate, and the most of them are in Central California coast. So you have a lot of birds that stay year round. They might do some sort of seasonal movement, but they're not migrating. They're staying locally, right? So it's the general overwhelming fact of life, except for that part of the world. So uh, I mean, let's kind of just marvel at migration for a moment. So there's huge numbers, right? We have last night 460 million birds that are migrating over North America. Like that's incredible. You can have 12 million birds over one location, one area in a single night migrating. Just phenomenal numbers. But within those huge numbers are a lot of incredible stories that are just defy the imagination about what birds are doing. So, for example, a great example is a bird called a bar-tailed godwit. We don't get those on the West Coast so much, but they breed in Alaska. Then they winter in New Zealand. That's 6,800 miles. When they leave Alaska, it is an 8 to 9 day journey to get to New Zealand. And they don't waterproof their feathers. They can't swim. So guess what? They have no choice but to make it 8 to 9 days of continuous migration. There are other shorebirds that migrate from the tip of South America to, say, New Jersey. That takes 10 days of continuous flight, 240 hours of continuous flight. I mean, those are amazing examples. You even have like little tiny warblers. So, for example, we have the black pole warbler, which breeds in Alaska. It migrates across Canada to the Atlantic Ocean and then south to South America, 5,000 miles, which is 3 million wing beats without food or water. This is incredible. And just to put it in perspective, so this little bird, the blackpoll warbler, is the weight of two first class, or it takes two of them the weight the same as a first class letter. Little tiny, lightweight birds. Um, for them to go 5,000 miles is equivalent to a human going 24 million miles, which is 10 times the distance from the Earth to the moon without food or water, right? That's so like inside of these huge numbers are incredible stories that are just hard for us to wrap our brains around, right?
And then
Um,
there's the nighttime thing you're referring to, how many migrate at night.
yeah. So yes, absolutely. So birds are migrating at night too in the dark. So we could talk about how they navigate. Um, but let's see. So why do birds migrate at night?
Because they have to keep going.
Because they what?
Because they have to keep going to make it to their destination.
Yeah.
Or
Any
is
other?
another way to
Yeah,
say
period.
No
they're
predators.
it's day and night, right? If they're going continuously, then they're not resting during the day. They're just flying straight day and night, right?
Yeah. Well, they need the rest, right? So typically what birds are doing is the general pattern for say songbird is to stop in the daytime, even for a couple days, feed, rest, rebuild muscle tissue, and then fly. They wait until just a few minutes after sunset, 15 minutes, maybe 2 hours after sunset. Then they lift into the air and they fly until about midnight, and then they stop, and then they sleep until sunrise, and then they feed and recuperate. Um, so I think Amber was saying that they just need to keep going. Well, one thing about migration, which is fascinating, is that uh, in the course of a normal day, most birds fly about 60 miles anyway, just in the course of flying back and forth for food and evading predators or moving around to their feeding areas and stuff. It's easy for a bird to go 60 miles a day. And at that rate, they could easily migrate with time to spare. It's just basically normal day flying behavior, just stretched out. Instead of back and forth, they're just going in one direction. It's the normal amount of flying they would do anyway, right? Um, so it's not like they're like wearing themselves out. Like, "Oh, I desperately got to get there. I'm just going to power through day and night till I get there." There's several other advantages of going at night, like Mia said. So one key one is no predators, right? That's easy. One is that when you're flying, you're generating a lot of heat. You're you're like just like you're running a sprint the whole time. And the night air is cooler, so you're venting off your heat, you're not building up heat. Another is that you're like panting the whole time. And the biggest limitation for birds migrating is dehydration. They're going to run out of water. So you're going to conserve water by migrating in the cool, humid night air. You're not going to lose as much water as you're migrating. And then a really important reason is what happens in the daytime with air. As the sun comes down and heats up the Earth's surface, what happens to air? It
Oh, it's
heats up on the Earth's surface, it
less
starts
dense.
rising. Yep.
Less dense. Yeah.
It creates turbulence,
Hmm.
and you're fighting that turbulence as you're migrating because the air is billowing up and rising and blowing around and stuff. And at night, everything stratifies and calms down because the Earth's surface cools. And at night, you can just pick a layer and stay in that layer and just go and go and go and go without having to encounter the turbulence that characterizes daytime air patterns. So those are some really compelling reasons for migrating at night, right? So if you're sorry, I'm talking too much. Am I talking too much?
You
That's
are
good.
not. It's
Okay, we can
really
make it a conversation,
so
but
fascinating. Yeah, I
okay,
think
this is so cool. I just get
yeah.
excited and just start going.
You're
But
doing
feel free
great.
to interrupt me.
It is
I'll try
so
to ask questions,
fascinating.
but
Keep going, keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Encore, encore.
um, okay, so let's go with so if you're migrating at night, how are you navigating? Dead stop.
They pull out their compass, of course.
Yeah, pull out the compass, right? Okay, so what compass are they using?
Is
They
it the
obviously need some
stars?
kind of compass, right?
Is it stars?
Stars. Okay, so the first thing you might think of that birds are migrating by is the sun, right? But it turns out that birds don't use the sun to navigate by. They use the sun as a compass to maintain a bearing. So what they'll do is they'll use other cues, pick a bearing, and then use the sun to maintain that bearing. But they're not picking a direction based on the sun. So, for instance, if you put a bird in a laboratory indoors and change its sense of time by changing the day-night length and messing up when it thinks this time of day it is and where the sun should be and stuff, then you put the bird outside and release it. It flies where it thinks the sun should be, not where the sun actually is, which indicates that they're not looking at the sun and picking a direction based on the sun. They are picking a direction and then looking at the sun and then using the sun to maintain that direction. And also, if you're migrating at night, can they see the sun?
Yep.
Yes, they can.
Oh, they can.
Oh,
They can, because you may not realize this. And usually in this, when I talk about something like this, I have a slide I can show. But the sun is, let's see what angle I have here. So say the sun is over here. Oh, I need a better way. But you have the Earth right here, and the sun is up over here, hitting the Earth's surface. It's hard to do this backwards. And 90 degrees away from where the sun is hitting the Earth's atmosphere is a band of polarized light. So it's 90 degrees offset. And as the sun goes over the sky, the dome of the sky, and drops below the horizon, that band of polarized light is following it 90 degrees behind. So for most of the night, they can see a black band across the sky of polarized light that's following the setting sun until it hits the horizon too. And that's most of the night, which is when they're migrating. They migrate until about midnight, typically, and that's about when that band of polarized light would hit the horizon, right? They also use the sun because they watch where the sun sets, pick a compass bearing, and memorize where the sun set, and then pick a bearing based on that. So they're using that also. And then we have the idea of stars. So do birds use the stars to navigate? What do you think? And there's a trick there because there's a little puzzle here that's not obvious, which is that the relationship between seasons and star constellations flips every 13,000 years. So, like in the summer, the whatever, the the Big Dipper is right here in the summer, And then 13,000 years later, winter, and the Big Dipper is here. It flips. That relationship flips every 13,000 years, which means there's no reason whatsoever to have a genetic memory of constellation maps that you would follow. But what doesn't change is the location of the North Star. The North Star is the axis of rotation that's always there. That stays constant. So they know where the North Star is. They can take a bearing based on the North Star or in relation to the North Star, and then use constellations to fine tune the direction. But the bearing they take is based on the North Star. Okay. So that's
Cool.
another, but that's cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Yeah.
How do they do that? I mean, has there been experiments to see that they actually are finding the North Star and then
Yes.
using the
It's
constellation?
really easy. So they've been doing this for a long time. What they do is in the laboratory, they take like a funnel, right? And the bird sits at the bottom of the funnel. This is a big funnel. I mean, it's 3 feet across or something like that, of paper, like blotting paper or something like that. And in the middle is a little spot where the bird can sit in the middle, and it's an ink pad. And then the bird tries to climb up the funnel in different directions, up the slope of the paper, and then comes back down and climbs up. And every time it does that, it leaves a set of ink footprints. And then what they can do is in the dome over that setup, they can do star maps, they can do fake suns, they can do electrical fields, they can do magnetic fields, they can play with any parameters around that funnel and watch which directions the birds go as they change those parameters. And then they know how the birds are using those cues. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah, that's how they study this. Um, and so you think that about birds seeing the landscape at night, but it's dark, so they can't see the landscape, but they're using the landscape also. So guess how they're using the landscape at night to migrate? I love these quizzical looks.
Elevation or something? No.
Close, kind of, but the air is always moving over the Earth's surface. Wind is moving over the surface. And as wind interacts with landscape, it creates sound. It creates ultra low frequency hums that birds can hear, but humans can't hear. And there's two main ways that that's really important. One is as the wind comes over the ocean, the air interacts with ocean waves to create what's called microbaroms. And I have this, no, I don't have this. I have it in one of my newsletters. Microbaroms, a really great word. As the wind comes over the wave crests, it creates this low frequency hum that birds can hear for hundreds or thousands of miles. And theoretically, a bird could migrate up the center of North America, up the Great Plains, listening to the Pacific Ocean in one ear and the Atlantic Ocean in the other ear. It could hear both oceans as it goes up the center of the continent and always know where it is. The other way that wind makes sounds in the landscape is when it goes over mountain crests. So you have these jagged peaks coming up. The wind goes up over the top of that crest and makes what are called gravity waves, which are the same thing as what happens when you like, does anyone know what the word fipple means? It's the mouthpiece of a wind instrument, that little thin edge that you blow on. Or if you take a piece of paper and hold it tight and blow on it, or a grass blade and blow on it, it makes that sound. That's a fipple. That's exactly what's happening when wind goes over the crest of a mountain range. It creates that same kind of vibration that birds can hear. And guess what? There's a mountain range all the way from the tip of South America to Alaska that follows the Pacific coast. It's a long American Cordillera. You could hear that sound of the wind going over the Sierra Nevada, Cascades, Sierra Madre Mountain, all the way up, or any other mountain range that they're following. They can hear the sound waves going over the crest and just follow that. So that's another way. And then I'll just,
Unbelievable. Wow.
yeah, it's incredible. And then finally, one more incredible way that birds use. And the sum total of all this is that birds actually have a lot of cues. Scientists used to think there was one cue that birds were using, but in fact, birds have a ton of different cues of what they're using. And the one that's really amazing is magnetic fields. right? Had people heard that idea before? So I'll go into this because I mentioned it in my newsletter, and I think Larry wanted to know more about this. So there's people have long known that birds can use magnetic fields to migrate. Um, but the problem is that the Earth's magnetic field is 10 to 100 times weaker than a refrigerator magnet. It's an extremely weak field, and there's no known way to perceive or respond to that magnetic field. And so the whole study of birds navigating by magnetism kind of just sat there for a long time until this what do you call him? Physicist came up with the idea that birds were using quantum mechanics to migrate. And this is an extremely complex topic. Larry wanted me to explain it, but I don't know if I can do the whole thing here. But I wrote about it in my newsletter. I could put the link in my chat here. Let's see if I can do that. Let's try this. Oh, I lost my link, I think. Okay, lost my link. So basically what's happening is when you have molecules with electron pairs circling around atoms, electrons like to stay in pairs. But in the presence of energy, sometimes an electron will jump from one molecule to another. So if you have pairs of electrons, sorry, this is really complicated, but if you have pairs of electrons, the molecules and the atoms are stable. But if an electron jumps from one to another, you no longer have a matched pair. You have one molecule that's missing an electron, one that's gained an electron. And this can happen in the presence of light. The sun's energy can jump an electron. And when an electron jumps and you have a mismatched pair, they're still connected to each other through quantum mechanics. So they're still somehow quantumly linked in a way that is hard to explain and people don't quite understand yet, but they're still linked. And once they become linked in this way, they become 10 million times more sensitive to magnetism. And so that is the magic thing that allows it to work. And it turns out that you need molecules to create these pairs, and those molecules have been discovered in the eyes of birds. So basically, birds have the pigment protein in their eyes that create quantum pairs that allow them to see the Earth's magnetic field at night. So at night, they're seeing the magnetic field as these dark bands going across the landscape. And so they're using quantum mechanics to migrate. Now, if that doesn't make sense, you can ask me questions because it's so hard. But I explained it with diagrams and stuff in my newsletter. Any questions about that? Because
Sure. So of course I have
yeah,
questions.
right.
So during the day, the light is creating these, is affecting the pairs,
Right.
right? During the day, because so that light hitting their retina
Yeah.
is affecting
It's
the
it's
chemical
exciting
response,
electrons that jump and create
right?
unstable
Which
pairs.
it puts them in this particular state.
Right.
And then let's say at night when they're flying, the Earth's magnetic field affects those pairs again in such a way that it, it changes the molecules. And
Well, no, but what happens
that's
is,
what the retinal nerves are picking up is these different molecule signals.
yes, it's creating a chemical precursor or chemical chain reaction, I guess you could say. And I don't want to get too far off on this. This is like just one
Right.
subset of a bigger story we're trying to tell here. But what's happening is that when you have these unstable pairs, the polarity of each electron is flipping instantaneously back and forth. And sometimes they're paired and sometimes they're reversed. And that relationship of how often they're paired and how often they're reversed is changed by the magnetic field, by the intensity of the magnetic field. And as you go from the equator to the pole, the magnetic field intensity is changing. And so the amount of flipping is going to change. And there's a chemical way of reading that changing ratio that the brain can pick up. And there's a center in the brain that reads that and tells the bird where it is in relation to the magnetic field.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a lot.
Great.
Yeah. Uh, and I think maybe we're kind of close to when
Yeah,
Amber wanted to, I don't want to keep rambling forever.
no, you're doing great. I think we have about 5 more minutes that we could talk. So maybe we want to have one more meaty topic at the end, which I was kind of wondering if we could talk about how, because we're nature in the city, so we're
Yeah.
really dominated by a peopled experience. And so how do things like light pollution, or I don't know, you could kind of pick your own adventure here, but how do humans contribute or hurt
Mhm.
by bird migration? I know
Right.
that the studies of bird banding is great. Yeah, just maybe focus on that topic a little bit.
Yes. Well, it's kind of a
Skyscrapers.
downer end note, maybe, but I mean, so here's a good question: is migration dangerous?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really dangerous. There are lots of obstacles along the way. So for birds that are resident that don't migrate, 10 to 20% of the adults die every year. But if you're a bird that migrates, 50% of the adults die.
Mm.
So there's an incredible amount of die-offs. They figure that 2.6 billion birds die every year, and they think most of it happens during migration. So there are so many obstacles, so many hurdles they have to overcome. The advantage of it, of migrating, is that yes, a lot more die, but the advantage is that if you do survive the migration, then you have much higher productivity. You have more babies survive, you're going to pass your genes on. So that's why migration works. Even though more die, more of them, more of your babies survive. So birds face a ton of obstacles in migration, and humans have only added to that dramatically. So Amber mentioned like lights in the city. That's a big one. So bright lights at night can attract birds from 3 miles away. They come into the bright lights and then they tend to circle the bright lights, which greatly increases the chance they're going to run into a building or they use up the energy that they need for migration. They just get confused. And especially, imagine this in the Bay Area when there's fog or low clouds hanging over the sky, lights are reflecting off of that and reflecting down. That really confuses birds too. So that's a serious risk. A lot of birds die from flying into buildings. So fortunately, there are a number of cities, I don't know how well San Francisco's doing with this, are working on programs to reduce lights at night. So that's a big one. Um, and but probably the main threat to migrating birds is habitat loss because migration is built of little islands of vital habitat from one end of the pathway to the other end of the pathway. Birds jump up in the nighttime, they start flying, they go a certain distance, and then they land again. And they want to land in food-rich patches. And when you start losing these patches, then the birds don't have the connected dots that allow them to migrate. And for that reason, about 75% of the birds populations in North America are down significantly, are basically crashing. So that's 3/4 of all bird species are really, really suffering. And boy, it just so happens that what is that? Close to 75% of birds are the migrants, right? So maybe there's a lot of overlap between the migrants and the ones that are dropping in population. So uh, but fortunately, at the same time, as you know, in the Bay Area, for instance, there's a lot of groups working to protect some of these vital sites. So you have like the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, which protects really important wetlands for migrating sandpipers and shorebirds and stuff like that. And those are international efforts that are going on. And I think the most positive thing I can say on these is that I think Amber mentioned this too, that like people really care about this. And there's a lot of people that are super engaged around these issues right now. And even better, there's amateur bird watchers everywhere who are sharing resources in real time. So I mentioned that Birdcast website. Anyone, whether you're a scientist or an amateur, can go to it and see in real time where the birds are migrating right now every 10 minutes. And then you have things like eBird, where people are posting, like Mia's Wilson's warbler showing up on this day at this time in this place, this bird has shown up. That incredible sharing worldwide in real time of when birds are arriving, leaving, what the bird numbers are. is an incredible tool and an incredible opportunity for people to participate and be part of these programs that are monitoring where the birds are moving, when they're moving, and what resources they need along the way. So I think that's probably the most positive way to
Yeah, beautiful.
that.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for helping us understand what people can do and what
Mhm.
we do in
Yeah.
relation to birds, and that deep care is something that's really,
Yeah.
we can create a more gentle human society that understands the needs of nature too. We're doing better. So I just want to thank you so much, David, for sharing with us today.
Oh my gosh.
I think
Yeah.
I'll just give you a huge round of applause. And like, it was completely mind blowing. And I think it took some notes. I was like, wow, so I think we can, we'd love to
I,
share the recording to this and get
yes, please
more
do.
people's eyes on it, because it was fantastic. And we'll share
I
thank you.
just shared the link to the newsletter I wrote on quantum migration, so that might help. But I'm
Beautiful.
also, I'll just mention it to everyone here and then everyone that watches this recording later. I'm here as a resource if people want to reach out and ask questions or continue these conversations. I love to talk with people about this, and if you have questions or observations you want to share, I love to hear what's going on there. I love to talk about it. Love to brainstorm or think about, what you might be seeing or how we can understand what you're seeing. So I'm here for people if you want to reach out anytime. And
Thank you.
definitely please follow the newsletter or, reach out anytime.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, David.
Amber,
Um,
this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
yeah,
you,
you're so
Mia. Thank
welcome.
you,
Thank you
Laura,
everyone for
Larry,
coming.
Tom.
Thanks.
We just, when we finish up, or before we finish up, I just want to reiterate that this is the very first time we're trying this. So we
Mhm.
want to hear your feedback, like what worked, what didn't, and how we can make it better for the next time we do this. Also, if you have topics or people that you think would be great for us to have as our
Mhm.
guest, like David, we'd love to hear that. We can even have some of us
I
internally
was gonna say, I
be those
nominate Mia.
spotlights. And then just thank you all for contributing financially to Nature in the City's stability and with your volunteer hours to our stability, because it takes all of us to run a tiny nonprofit, and we're so grateful for everyone's contributions. And I think with that, we can say goodbye and end our recording, and then maybe we'll stick around a little bit and do some final greetings.
Thank you.